Hello, welcome you all to editorial discussion and news analysis of vlearnias IAS. Today we are going to have discussion on two topics. One is on the contemporary main issue, the monkeypox. Second is on the evergreen topic, that is on climate change and its adaptability, especially in the reference of India. Okay, let's begin the discussion. The first topic for today's discussion is about monkeypox. So what is the context? The first case in the country of monkeypox was detected in the southern state of Kerala. So this topic mainly relates to topics of issues relating to social sector development and also on GS paper 3. So let us look more about what is this monkeypox. This monkeypox is nothing but a viral zoonotic disease. So this virus is the main host which spread this disease, and it is a zoonotic disease, means the mode of transmission is from animals to human. Why this name monkeypox? Because it was firstly detected in the form of pox in monkeys, and it is endemic to Nigeria. So what do you mean the difference between this endemic and pandemic? So mainly this difference is based on the geographical spread of the disease. So mainly endemic disease is mainly present in a particular population or a particular region. So when it starts to spread in a much larger scale, then it will become an epidemic disease which spread to different regions with or between various population in a particular region. And finally the pandemic disease, which is a very pan-spatial spread among different population also. So like we know that COVID-19, which is a pandemic and which occurs across the continent and had occurred throughout the globe. Let's know about the historical outbreak of this disease. It was firstly reported in Democratic Republic of Congo, but the last confirmed case of this was found in Nigeria, which was very vulnerable to the population of that country. The symptoms mainly it occurs in the form of rashes on the skin, and there will be swellings in the limb glands also. This monkeypox occurs like rashes in the skin like this, and the transmission mode is mainly two types, mostly from wild animals and also from human to human contact through bodily fluid transmission like that. Why it is so vulnerable? Because it can spread rapidly and it can cause 1 out of 10 deaths. Even WHO has assumed that it will lead to a morbidity of around 10 million population across the world, which is very severe. So what about the treatment and vaccine for this disease? So far there is no specific vaccine or treatment for monkeypox. All the vaccine which is available is similar to that of smallpox vaccine, which is only 85% effective. At the same time, there is no global system to manage the spread of this monkeypox. Let us look into the case study. Recently, the first case of the country was recorded in Kerala from a traveler from Middle East. Actually, the health ministry of the state has strictly screened the infected person and also tracing the contact the person had with other population. The state which already had experience of other infections like COVID, Ebola, so they already know how to tackle this type of infection. So what the author is saying is that there is no need for any panic at this moment. What is needed is the strict vigilance. So other saying is about having an increased number of testing between the population, contact tracing and building awareness. So rather than stigmatizing the people having this infection, we must be aware and vigilant about the spread, and don't hesitate to have initial testing, and all the government machinery should be strict and vigilant for contact tracing and building awareness among the people. Only by this type of strict and vigilant procedure among the civil society and the government, only then we can tackle this type of infection. So the next topic of today's discussion is about climate change and mainly focusing on the Indian region. So this topic can be related to the following aspect of the syllabus, like different geophysical phenomena and climate change in paper 3. So then first we will look about what is this climate change. Before looking into climate change, we must know what is this climate. We know that there will be day-to-day variation in the atmospheric phenomena like temperature, pressure, rainfall in a particular region. So over a period of time, this aggregate value or aggregate change is calculated upon. This aggregate value of the change in the weather patterns of a particular region is known as climate of that region. For example, when we consider about India, India is known to have a monsoonal type of climate. Why monsoonal? Although we have a spatial variability of different climatic zones throughout India, like we have desert, we have glaciers, we have heavy rainfall in northeast region, we have coastal type climate in coastal states, still we are known as monsoonal climate. This is because the total aggregate phenomena of climate throughout the centuries, maybe a lot of millions of years, the country is having a monsoonal type of climate, mainly due to the uh, wind weather pattern that occurs in the Indian Ocean region. So this aggregate value of the weather phenomena of a particular region is known as climate of that region. Then we must know about what is this climate change. So a standard definition is always useful to write in your examination about what is this climate change. So what is this climate change? Climate change is nothing but a periodic modification. So a modification in the climate over a period of time, mainly brought about by geological, chemical, biological, geographical factors. But the most crucial factor that is causing the contemporary climate change is anthropogeneity. Humans are altering the climate. You know that climate is a whole system which has interlinking with other systems like biosphere, hydrosphere, geographical factors. Any alteration in this interlinking will create an imbalance in the equilibrium, and this imbalance causes a climate change. So what are the effects of this climate change? It causes damaging weather events like hurricanes, floods, cyclones, etc., and also rising temperature. We know that already the places that were extremely cold is facing heavy heat wave like phenomena, especially in Europe, Canada, etc. So this climate change is having a negative effect on the survival of human beings is concerned. First we will look into what are the factors that causes a climate change. So whenever in examination for a geographical event, any factors that causes that particular event is asked, it must be mainly categorized into two types. One is natural factors and the other one is anthropogenic factors. Always take into consideration the human factors that causes that particular event. And in order to categorize the natural factors, we can classify mainly it on the morphological factors, climatological factors, even hydrospheric factors or hydrological factors, etc. So let us first look into what are the important factors that cause the climate change. Number one factor, that is natural factors. So the first factor that caused this climate change is nothing but the continental drift. This is a very old paleo theory, I will say, which causes the climate change. So what is this continental drift all about? It is study or a theory that says that the continents in the globe, which was earlier known as a single supracontinent or single continent known as Pangaea, which is surrounded by a water body known as Panthalassa. So over the period of time, this Pangaea got drifted or splitted and started drifting. Along with this drifting, climate change occurred due to the variation in the climatic factors of this region. So this is considered as the prime most factors that cause this climate change, and it is one of the most prime natural factor that is causing this climate change. So next is variation of the Earth orbit. we know that Earth revolves around the Sun and also rotates around its own axis. So when it has an inclination around Sun about a tilting about its own axis about 37-degree angle, it has a tilting to Sun's revolution. And this variation in mainly caused by the Milankovitch cycle. So what is this Milankovitch cycle? This Milankovitch cycle is nothing described as the collective effect of change in the Earth movements on its climate over thousands of years. That is, due to this variation in its tilting and its eccentricity during its revolution and rotation, there will be changes in the overall climate of the globe, mainly because of the amount of radiation that it gets from the Sun due to changes in this inclination. This cumulative change is known as Milankovitch cycle, and the author says that this Milankovitch cycle is the prime reason for or the prime other natural factor that causes this climate change. So the another theory is about plate tectonics. It is a most advanced theory which talks about the spatial variability in the continent. So what are the main crux? The main crux of this theory is that inside the Earth there is a huge conveyor belt of gases. This conveyor belt pushes the plates around the Earth's surface. Like there is a plate of European, there is a plate of Indian Ocean plate, Pacific plate is there. So with changes in the internal heat, there will be variation in the spatial distribution of continents, and this variation of the spatial distribution of continent also causes climate change in different parts of the globe. And another factor is about geophysical phenomena like volcano erupts. A lot of gases are also infected into the atmosphere. A lot of sulfur dioxide. There are a lot of aerosol particles within the volcano. This or aerosol particle will drift throughout in the atmosphere and travels lot of distance within the atmosphere, which again causes changes or alters the weather patterns of different regions, which in turn alters the climate of different parts of the globe. Another important factor, that is hydrological factor, which causes the climate change, is ocean currents. We know that the whole globe, which is surrounded by water, is split into various oceans and seas. So when there is a hot water body within the equator region and a cold water body within the polar region, this water gets circulated from pole to equator and from equator to pole by means of ocean currents. So this variation in the ocean currents temperature can also causes changes in the climate of that particular region. So another class of factors which cause climate change is anthropogenic factors or human causing factors. So what is this? For the first factor is greenhouse gases. So how is this effect of greenhouse gases have on the climate change? First and foremost, we must know about the heating of the earth. Earth is not heated by the incoming solar radiation. It is heated by the reflecting radiation from the Earth's surface, or long wave radiation from the Earth's surface, and this heat is trapped by certain amount of aerosolic particles and gases present in the Earth atmosphere. And this type of gases which traps on the outgoing solar radiation is known as greenhouse gases. Why greenhouse name comes is that in European countries and other countries where where it is very cold, there are certain houses built in order to trap heat for the plants, and this type of houses which traps heat to maintain the heat for growing of plants is known as greenhouse. Likewise, the earth system also act like a greenhouse which traps outgoing gases and maintain the heat within the earth surface. So the issue is that with the frequent anthropogenic activities like industrialization, automobile increase, other changes in land use, sectoral changes in agriculture industry everywhere, there's an increased amount and there is a shift in the equilibrium of the concentration of greenhouse gases, which increase the greenhouse gases amount in the atmosphere, which in turn increase the amount of heat trapped within the earth atmosphere. So these are some of the important greenhouse gases within the earth atmosphere. Number one is water vapor. Another one is carbon dioxide. But the increased emission of carbon dioxide is causing an increase in the greenhouse gas content. Chlorofluorocarbon, which mainly occurs in the refrigeration activities of humans. Methane and nitrous oxide is also an important greenhouse gas. So another aspect which leads to changing climate change due to human factor is change in land use pattern. We know that a lot of land is divert to different uses, especially the forest land is forests are cut down and mainly used for industrial and other activities for urbanization. Likewise, for mainly economic aspect is considered by the humans by clearing about these forests and the natural wealth we get from the nature. And a case study about this is about the Amazon forest and also the Sahel region of North Africa, where there is a huge deforestation has occurred, and this has resulted in a phenomenon known as desertification, which in turn alters the climate of that particular region. And another is atmospheric aerosol. Likewise, I said that chemicals like chlorofluorocarbon and other refrigeration liquids alters the solar radiation or absorbs more heat from the outgoing radiation, which in turn alters the climate of that particular region. So this is a classification of aerosols. One is natural aerosols and anthropogenic aerosols. And these natural aerosols mainly comes into atmosphere through phenomena like volcanism. While anthropogenic aerosols comes mainly due to the human activities like industrialization, changes in the land use pattern, etc. So this changes in both natural and anthropogenic aerosols has altered the equilibrium concentration of these aerosols and increased the amount of aerosols which absorb the heat in the atmosphere, which results in more and more trapping of heat in the atmosphere and changes in the overall equilibrium of the climate. So what does the author say? For the public pressure to drive climate change, we need to consider climate catastrophe as largely man-made. So far, we look into climate change mainly as natural phenomena, but this is not. Although it is a natural phenomena, the events or outcome is a natural phenomena. The main driver for this outcome is mainly due to the human activities and human-made activities. Post COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen lot of climate vulnerable events or disasters like heat waves. Heat waves mainly in India. There's a lot of heat waves, torrential downpours in South India, and also we know the heat waves occur in Europe, Canada, and many of the cold countries is facing severe outbreak of heat waves, and also extreme floods and other events occurs in many of the vulnerable mountain regions also. So when we consider India, uh, our country is more vulnerable to this climate change event, especially our location to the Indian Ocean region and also the Himalayan region is very prone to the climate change, and India is considered as the fourth worst climate migrant country. That means among the climate migration or changes migration induced mainly due to climate change, we stand fourth, and this climate change has affected the livelihood, labor loss, and has huge impact on our economy as well. So what does the author says? The author says there are two-part approach in adapting to this climate change. Number one is to adapt to the climate impact. So first is you know that majority part is naturally occurring, so we can't fight on that. So first is we must adapt to this climate change by by building resilient infrastructure and making people aware about the events and proper forecasting. Likewise, we can adapt to this climate change. Second is mitigation. This is the post climate change, how we will mitigate or how we will reduce the future impact. That part also we must take care of. So we know this is the main hotbed of climate change migrants, especially in the regions of Ganga and Himalayan state. A lot of people are migrating due to this climate change effect, especially in the West Bengal region of Sundarbans also. and in the southern regions also there is more vulnerable to the heat wave. People are migrating to the coastal parts of the country. So now let's look at what the author says about arresting the climate change. So mainly there are two pathways to arrest this climate change phenomenon or the after effects of this climate change. Mainly we say is about like mitigation and adaptation. So what do you mean by this mitigation? It is the action to reduce the climate change. At the main time, what is this adaptation? This adaptation mainly refers to manage the risk of climate change. So how we will be reducing this climate change or mitigating the climate change? One is mainly through sustainable transportation. Majority of the greenhouse gas emission is from transport industry and through non-renewable resource and other exploration, deforestation, etc. So switching to sustainable transportation is one of the main action that can be taken to reduce this climate change. The another one is having energy efficiency. So that much energy efficiency system we have in our daily life, that much we can arrest this climate change, promoting clean energy. At the same time, how we can manage the risk of climate change? By disaster management and business continuity. That means mainly focusing on the business modeling of disaster management or sustainable development by infrastructure upgrades. Majority of the vulnerable of the climate change outcome is mainly due to the vulnerability in the infrastructure facilities. So upgrading these infrastructure facilities with resilient infrastructure to the climate change is one of the main pathway. Other is flood protection. Likewise, new energy system, water conservation, education, mainly environment education, disaster management education, protecting natural environment. Whole measures should be taken in a single system. Like both climate change and human activities should be in a certain loop to control this climate change. Like mitigation, we can reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Long-term focus on avoiding future impact. Global scale cross-sectoral efforts are needed, and also subnational level. That means we should make the efforts from the bottom-up approach. Now, and also how we can adapt with by reducing the vulnerability by enhancing the adaptive capacity. In this aspect, both technological and um, financial adaptation becomes an important factor. A large-scale cross-sectoral effect is needed. That means we should work across the sectors. Like there will be collaboration between agriculture and industry. Like this, there will be cross-sectoral collaboration should be there. So another way is about management of dams. You know that there are a lot of events in our country that causes glacier lake outbursts and floods. So what do you mean by this glacier lake outburst? This is nothing that a sudden release of water from the glacier lake. You know that in Himalayas at top of the mountain there are glaciers. So where building huge dams will increase pressure on these glaciers, and at a certain point of time there will be burst in this glacier causing glacial outburst flood. This is very much damaging to the whole ecosystem of the Himalayas and people there. So we must control the dam building should be frequent check in the dams also, not to control this glacial outburst. Another way is increasing the disaster management allocation in GDP, which is a very important factor, especially which it enables a post disaster management activities, and also in enhancing the human resource for uh, human resource to adapt with these changes. For that, we must scale up with global fundings like World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Asian Development Bank, and also in work in close collaboration with NGOs like World Food Programs in order to mitigate the after effect of this climate change. Also, there we should also take in the aspect of federalism. There should be more about a cooperative federalism between central and state in the aspect of disaster is concerned. And we should work from the local level in order to mitigate the after effect of this disaster. Especially, we must make use of the fund like MG Narega, which can be used for building up resilient infrastructure and enhancing the livelihood of those who are affected with this disaster. So the final aspect is about the climate resilient agriculture. We know that the country has been facing extreme events like heat waves, cold waves, which affects the farming system of the country. So climate resilient agriculture is an important mitigating response to these changes. So in order to promote this, we must promote agriculture practices which are not water intensive, support afforestation, and also sufficient financial transfer must be given by using funds like CAMPA fund, etc. Okay. So climate resilient agriculture calls for diversification. That means cultivation of multiple crops on the same farm, so that if any particular crop cause damage, we can move up with the other one. And also flood and storm have worsened the vast area of coastline, so we must have sufficient infrastructure in order to fight against the coastal erosion, other flooding in the coastal regions also. So now let's look on the very special aspect of this flood prone areas of the country. This is one of the this green region is one of the main regions of flood prone, especially on the coastal states and the regions of the Ganga and Yamuna river also. Final aspect, we will look into the case study of Kerala, where you know that 3 or 4 years back there was huge flood in Kerala, a flood in a century that occurred in Kerala. Post there are infrastructure which helped uh, in the resilient, people started building resilient infrastructure which helps to mitigate the after effect of these floods. Like this, flood water do not enter into their house. Okay, likewise we can adapt to this flood and other disaster that occurs in this region. So overall we must be in a position to manage both mitigation and adaptation factor to fight against the climate vulnerability.